Okay.
Okay, we're calling the meeting to order at 7:03. And we're going to juggle the agenda a little bit because we have David Versal here to do our kickoff for our marketing analysis. So let me turn it over to Dave and let's go from here.
Yeah, so Dave and I have been just trading some emails the last couple weeks, and he's put together kind of a kickoff presentation for us tonight, along with kind of a little bit of a to-do list and things for us to consider. I don't know if he's finalized it, but maybe he has. But he's planning on coming into town, and we believe the second week of November.
Yeah, the week of November 8th.
Okay.
And I'll block out the better part of that week to tour around and meet with folks. I'll hold the agenda on that till later, but that's the week I am planning on coming up to do my field research.
Right. So we'll have a little to-do list on our part to make sure we line up, kind of an idea of what he needs to see and who he needs to talk to while he's here, and just take advantage of that. Kristen had shared that kind of master list of, I guess, maybe interested parties that we consider interviewing. We've got to call that down a little bit. Dave will get into it a little bit more in one of his slides, but he thought it might be advantageous to put together a couple groups, maybe a couple retailers and a couple other folks, even via Zoom, and interview them collectively. So that might be something maybe we need to have a conversation with the chamber on that and figure out the best way to facilitate and make that happen. Yeah, I think at this point, Dave, we'll we can turn it over to you. I think you have the ability to share your screen.
Yeah, it looks like I do.
Okay, good.
Okay. Everybody see my presentation?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. Well, again, it's nice to finally have the chance to kick this project off. Been, thinking about it for a while, and it's good to finally get into it. I apologize if I repeat myself here. I know some of you were part of the interview panel that I presented to back in, was it May, June, somewhere around then? So you may have seen some of this before, but even if you have, it's been several months. So a good refresher is probably a good thing. So just to get started here, I'm David Versal. I'm an economic development and real estate consultant. I'm based in the Atlanta area, but I have a long history working in Western New York, and specifically working with Dave Manjoya at his day job in the town of Amherst. I've been working on and off in Amherst for over 20 years now. I'm now on my 8th project with either the town of Amherst or Village of Williamsville, but I've also done a lot of other work around the region in Buffalo, Clarence, Lockport, and other places. This is my first time working in Grand Island. I've long been interested in the community because you are a truly unique place, and I'm really excited about the chance to dig into this project, learn more about your community, and help you come up with some hopefully good and implementable ideas for how to grow and sustain your economy over the next few years. So the place I started on this was with the community values as you laid out in your comprehensive plan. And I literally just found out 2 hours ago that this plan was actually authored by my other client, Supervisor Culpa in Amherst, before he was a supervisor at his day job. So interesting what a small world it is. So I think it's a great list of values, very aspirational things you want for your community. But what struck me in reviewing this is that of these 7, I really would say only 2 of them are true today. Yes, you have phenomenal natural resources, probably unlike any other community located as close as you are to not just one, but two urban centers. And you are a very unique island community that's, again, not like most other suburban places, that it feels much more rural, much more detached from the hustle and bustle of daily life in Buffalo or Niagara Falls. Now, as for the rest of it about wanting to, not be a pass through, have strong gateways, a true town center, a more prominent identity, and more diversity, those are all works in progress. I think you all recognize that. And this study I see as a way to really help bring these things closer to reality than they are today. I mean, you kind of think about the broad scope of this market and economic study, that's really where it's headed, is helping you fulfill the vision that you've already clearly expressed in your comp plan. Oh, I got ahead of myself there. So just kind of a recap of things you've already done and how this is just picking up on that momentum. There was the comp plan, the Bicentennial Park, the West River Shoreline Trail, the new Western New York Welcome Center, which is, quite a striking and dramatic approach as you come into Niagara Falls. The farmland protection plan, the waterfront revitalization plan, and the sidewalk accessibility project in the town center area. So a lot of good energy and good momentum in the community to build on. I think it's important to understand, that this plan is going to be rooted very strongly in the market and understanding, what's feasible. You can come up with a vision. I've seen lots of communities, excuse me, come up with very bold visions for major developments, town centers, et cetera. But the market just hasn't been there to support it, and the vision never becomes a reality. The key thing to remember here is the implementation of this is going to be driven by the private sector, by developers, by companies, by investors, believing in the vision, believing in the opportunity, and deciding that we are going to invest and we are going to, develop in this community. And so kind of a key thing to determine as part of this process is just how much market support is realistic and not just coming up with big ideas and pretty pictures. In that, there's a lot of things that market studies that just look at the numbers can miss. If you just, you'll hire someone to do a retail market study, they'll often just take a look at, okay, what's the future population projection? How many households are there? What's the income level? What are the demographics of the people who live here? Yeah, there hasn't been enough growth here to support the kind of retail that you want, on to the next thing. That misses a lot of the story. It misses what's the local culture like, what things are actually happening in the town that might change the picture. The idea that people want special places to be, the power of vision and placemaking. This image you see here is from the town I used to live in Biddeford, Maine, which was a old mill town that was written off as dead 20 years ago, that has been transformed into one of the leading centers of arts and creative economic activity in New England. And a lot of it's just through simple and inexpensive things like, putting up some concrete barriers and some outdoor tables and some string lights. None of this cost very much money, but it did take, a vision by the city and the owner of the mill buildings to actually have the wherewithal to make this happen, which did require coordination. So that's one thing about vision and placemaking that we can't lose sight of. Another thing is how much the community embraces growth and change. If developers are looking at you and say, well, that community doesn't really want me here, they don't support my project, I'm going to have 500 people in matching t-shirts showing up at a public hearing denouncing my project and saying we don't want you to do this here, then you're not going to get investment. So there really needs to be a sense in the community that this is your vision, this is what you want. And if a developer comes in, they're just helping you fulfill their vision and not trying to import their vision and force you to accept it. I think this gets back to the point about diversity as one of your aspirational goals, that, the money's going where, people from the outside are wanted. There's certainly been a lot of anti-development sentiment in suburban and rural communities around the country, not wanting to change. But, I get the sense that Grand Island knows what it is, knows that you have a lot of special assets with your rural areas, your farmland, your waterfront, but you also recognize with an interstate highway going right through the middle of the island and a pretty strong base of industrial businesses, that there is a sense that there are places we want to grow and can grow. And last but not least, understanding, what are the pull factors? What makes us special that makes people want to live, work, and visit here, and really getting into the meat of what that is that drives people to make those decisions. Okay, so just quickly to run through the process over the next few months with this project. I'm underway with the data collection and analysis part of it. I'll share a few very preliminary thoughts on that in a minute. Stakeholder outreach is what we'll be getting into with the interviews and with visiting the town and meeting people and seeing what's going on. That will then lead to putting together a report that gives you a snapshot of market conditions, where you've been and where you are now. A piece of that will be what have the impacts been of the pandemic. This is a new thing I've been doing over the past year and a half, which Amherst was actually my guinea pig for, was to take a look at some non-traditional indicators of what the pandemic did to economic activity and to people's travel patterns, spending patterns, et cetera. So we will certainly take that into consideration and see what has changed in the wake of COVID, and what things a year and a half into it have proven to be durable, because a lot of people's behaviors have changed. We're having this meeting on Zoom. I don't think 2 years ago that would have happened. I would have been on an airplane flying up there. So the world has changed and continues to evolve. Another piece of this is taking a look at some best practice communities, which we'll get into in a minute, and then culminating finally at the end of the process with the final report that will be designed as a blueprint for what you do next to help achieve your vision for economic growth and prosperity. So really quickly, just want to share a few data points with you. I know that these are probably things you are aware of, but it's good for me coming into this from the outside to actually put some numbers behind it. First thing I'll say is that Grand Island has been showing some strong growth over the past decade. One of the great positive surprises in Western New York has been that the region's population actually went up over the last 10 years, which is the first time in many decades that that's been the case. Even more surprisingly, that population growth was led by the city of Buffalo, which reversed a 60-year decline in population and is growing again. Grand Island grew by a little under 5% over the last 10 years. It wasn't a huge growth in terms of numbers, but you do have 1,000 more residents now than you had 10 years ago, which is a pretty significant number for a community of your size. And if you leave out the loss in Niagara County, the population for Erie County population growth was almost 4% over the last decade. And so the whole metro area was a little slower because Niagara lost population. But Erie County is growing, Grand Island's growing, Buffalo is growing. Most of the core of the region is growing. The growth has not been even. So this is taking a look at the 3 different census tracts in the town. You actually have 4 now. As of 2020, 73.02 was split into 2, but this is going back to 2010. So I'm still showing it as 3. For those who don't know, a census tract is a completely contrived area that the Census Bureau uses to report data. Each tract has, somewhere between about 3,000 and 8,000 people. And, so each one of these kind of divides it up into different segments of your community. Most of the growth over the past decade was in tract 73.04 over on the east side of the island. That saw about 20% increase in the number of households and about a 17% increase in the population. It is interesting to see that, the household growth outstripped the population growth everywhere on the island. And, that's a function of smaller households and people having fewer kids living with them. I'll get back to that point about household makeup and age. And, with a population of 73.03, while it did go down, the number of households actually increased. So you are seeing housing demand and more households, even in areas of the town that have lost population, because you have different types of households that want to move to the area. This was probably the most interesting thing I found so far. is that you're growing both at the older and at the younger ends of the spectrum. So like the rest of the world, the 65 plus population is growing rapidly. This is mostly driven by just demographics and aging in place. You know, baby boomers turn 65 by the millions every year. And there's a lot of, people who were just under 65 in 2010 who are now over 65. And that's boosted that share of your population. You've seen a significant increase in young adults. So this box here from 8.9 to 11.2% of the town's population is now those, young adults, millennials, age 25 to 34 that are forming households. However, you're losing your youth. Age 15 to 24 has seen a significant drop off in the share of population. So as kids finish high school and go out into the world, they're not staying. And that's what this is telling you here. You have a somewhat smaller share of children under 15 than you did in 2010. But I would suspect, because you've been attracting young families, that this share is going to start climbing again. And you'll see more kids being born in Grand Island over the next few years. Talking about the pandemic, this is kind of the long-term picture of employment growth by month going back to 2010. Obviously, there's seasonal fluctuations. But if you look at the top of the mountain for each year, it was on a trajectory pretty much in a straight line going up through 2019. The region's job base grew from about 500 to 520,000 in 2010 to about 550,000 by the end of 2019. When the pandemic hit, there was an immediate drop of 21% in employment in the Buffalo metro area. That, when the lockdown happened, 21% of your jobs just went poof. There was a rapid recovery. There was a lot of talk, if you remember, a year and a half ago about V-shaped recoveries and U-shaped recoveries and K-shaped recoveries. Well, I'm not sure what this shape is, but this is what the recovery looks like. It was V-shaped for a while as businesses reopened, and then it, stopped and then started again into the fall. And then as the Delta variant rampaged through the country through the early part of this year, there was another drop off. But as of March, which was the last month that had been reported as of when I collected this a week ago, you are starting to see jobs come back. However, the regional job base in Buffalo is still 9% below where it was in February of last year, pre-COVID. So there'll be a lot of implications of that in terms of where you are and what your future growth prospects are. So that's just a quick look at the data. Actually, before we go on, want to see if anyone has any questions or comments about what we know, and if there's other things you'd like to know more about as I proceed with the data collection.
Dave, do we know where those 1,000 people came from? Do we know if they were out migration or in migration from outside the area or from adjoining communities?
Not yet. I can get that from the American Community Survey, which is a sample of the population that goes through 2019. Unfortunately, the full Census 20 data set has been delayed in being reported and probably won't be out until early next year. There's been a lot of complications with it that have slowed things down. So the short version is we don't know exactly, but just by looking back over the 2019 American Community Survey data and by birth rates and death rates that are reported each year, we should be able to get a good picture of in-migration. There's also other sources that can get to that. So I'll certainly look into that, because that is something that's definitely worth knowing. I suspect what you're getting at, Dave, is the idea of, there have been people from outside Western New York moving to the region during COVID for the lower cost of living and slower pace of life than in bigger, more expensive cities. And I guess you're trying to drive that. Has that phenomenon hit your community, something like that?
Yeah, I think it'd be interesting. I mean, I always anecdotally thought, listen, people on Grand Island either grew up on Grand Island or they've kind of moved from Niagara Falls.
Yeah.
I was a Niagara Falls kid for most of my life, and most people from Niagara Falls ended up in Lewiston, Wheatfield or Grand Island.
Mhm.
Just wondering if there was a source for that. The other thing on the demographics, when you broke it down into the age cohorts, I'm wondering if there's a kind of a standard across the country to kind of compare that with. I mean, how do
Mhm.
we stack up versus, it's kind of a unique geography. So I don't know if
Mhm.
there's, some of the best practices or comparables you were looking at,
Yeah.
but how that kind of stacks up against some other communities
Mhm.
might be of
Yeah, I mean,
interest.
certainly we can do that with I can do that nationally. It might be
Yep.
worth doing it for the Buffalo metro area or at least Erie County. And it's probably worth doing with the case study communities. That's something I was
Yeah.
planning on doing, was doing a
Okay.
demographic comparison of the communities. I will tell you, while this part with the older residents is consistent with what's happening nationally, this disparity between 15 to 24 and 25 to 34 is not typical. That this is something that is pretty unique to your community of losing you know kids once they turn 18, but then getting a pretty large influx of people in their late 20s and early 30s. Usually that if those who lose the youth, they don't get them back till later typically. All right. So moving on to the best practices part of it, just trying to give some context of what I was looking for in terms of giving you suggestions for what best practices communities to look at. We don't need to decide on this right now, but I just want to get you thinking about it. The point of this is trying to learn how communities that have similarities to you have handled growth and development issues. And so I think it's important to not just look in Western New York or thereabouts, that you need to look some from the region, but some elsewhere. It's important to look at communities of different sizes and characteristics. I think it's also important to look at communities that, like you, are in the orbit of larger cities, but aren't those with major visitor attractions. So, trying to stay away from places that have their own draw. Large numbers of people coming in for one purpose, that they have to sort of build together an economy based on many different parts. I want to stay away from communities that sell themselves as gateways. I always tell communities that if you call yourself a gateway, that means that you're admitting you're not as good as the place they're going to.
Yeah.
So you want to stay away from that. Places that have, sort of carved out their own unique destinations, and not call yourself, gateway to Niagara, because that's all you'll be, is you just, drive through and use the bathroom on the way to the falls. And you definitely don't want to be that.
Dave, can we
I think,
can we
yes.
yeah, let me just jump in on the third point here. Um, we don't have, I guess, we don't have Niagara Falls on Grand Island, but one thing that's happened this year is there's a new operator for our amusement park that looks like they're going to spend some significant capital in upgrading it. They spent a lot of money to get the part of the water park attraction back up and running, even for a month. So I thought that was a good sign. And then we've got a couple, obviously, more like a supply side things with respect to campgrounds and stuff. So I think that's
Mhm.
something I think we want to look at, because the people that are going to those things, a significant amount of them do come from outside the area. I mean, they're definitely not just supported by Grand Island. Fantasy
Mhm.
Island, probably a little bit more of a regional attraction. But I
Yeah.
do know, at least when the Canadian border was open, you get a fair amount of, Canadians coming over, day trips, or, at least it would
Right.
be something. If somebody was coming to Niagara Falls, maybe they go there for the day too, depending on the age of their children and such. So,
Mhm. Okay. Fair
want to
enough.
bring
I'm
that up.
just, trying
Yeah,
trying
yeah.
to stay away from, like, I didn't want to compare you to Sandusky, Ohio,
No,
because,
no.
they have a major theme park that draws people from all over the country.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's definitely not Sandusky.
Okay. All right. So in terms of those best practices, why isn't this move? Okay, great. So these are 5 I came up with as a start. Again, a mix of local and not local, and tell me if any of these are, good or bad or otherwise. I came up with the town of Greece, Braddock Bay, and that it is, technically a suburb of Rochester, but, with Braddock Bay kind of has its own unique, wild and, very eco-tourism. People's opinions on, is that a good model for a place you'd like to look at for models of ecotourism and outdoor recreation? Yes, no, maybe.
I don't know the area very well to know if it has things that we want to aspire toward or not. I don't know if
Okay.
anybody else does.
No, that's part of the issue. I know where 4 of the 5 places are,
Mhm.
but don't know enough about any one of them.
Okay.
To say that'd be a good fit.
Is there a way to know what these different communities are doing or have going for them that would be things that we want to look at?
Well, I mean, that would be part of the research is, we want to identify places that you see things to aspire to and then find out what's going on. I mean, the last 3, I know a lot about. The first 2, I don't. They're just places that I'm aware of. And I know that they've put a lot of effort into the kinds of things you're talking about. So maybe we can take a little bit of time, and if you all of you can think over the next couple of weeks about, are there other places you're aware of that we might want to look at instead of any of these?
I'm not saying these aren't appropriate. I just don't
Okay.
know enough about them to know whether or not that's where we
Okay.
want to go.
All right, well, I can tell you what I know about the others, if that's helpful. I know the least about Greece, honestly. St. Clair, Michigan is north of Detroit. It's, as you see, a waterfront city like you. It's, like you, it's, between 2 lakes, but not on them. It's between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. And they've done a lot with, improving their waterfronts, as you see there with that image. And, they did have a traditional downtown that they built around as a tourist destination, but it was not tourist oriented until fairly recently. So I think there's a lot to like there, especially with the part about, being on a river between 2 lakes. Skaneateles, I'm assuming many of you are familiar with it or have been there. I have been there. It's on one of the Finger Lakes. I'm blanking on which one, not far from Syracuse. And, again, a charming historic downtown, but they've really retooled themselves as kind of the go-to day trip and short getaway destination for people from central New York. And, it was not something that happened accidentally. There's been a lot of emphasis put on developing it as a destination. Franklin, New Hampshire is a community where I've actually been working with them on a project. It's an old mill town, fallen on hard times, and they're rebuilding around one particular type of outdoor activity, being whitewater. So I think this is a really good one because, you have some of the best still water paddling around Grand Island, anywhere in the Northeast. Different audience, but same idea, that it's a place that draws a lot of people, has a lot of potential, but they had no tourism infrastructure to speak of. They have a private developer who's building a man-made whitewater course in the river that's basically capturing the power of nature and making it into something bigger. And the city is developing a riverfront park around it and trying to put financing together to do a major downtown tourist-oriented development that would include lodging and retail and other support services for tourism. And then last but not least is Cambridge, Maryland, on the eastern shore of Maryland. It's about an hour and a half from DC and Baltimore, so a little further from major cities. But it's, it was a very gritty place historically. Its major industries involved crabs and seafood, and they've completely transformed themselves as a high-end tourist destination. So those are some examples. We can chew on them over the next couple weeks and maybe just kind of stay in touch on email. I'm not going to get into this part of the project right away. So we have a little time to think about if there might be some other models we want to look at.
And for those of you that are taking notes, we'll send this PowerPoint presentation out to everybody after this. So
Yep.
you all will have this and not have to remember how to spell skinny atlas or however it is. So.
Yes. So it is. Yeah.
Excuse me, David. What I'll try to do is take a quick look at a couple of the places that I know nothing about, like Greece and St. Clair, and see what I can dig up online. And if I can find something that gives some good comparisons, I'll shoot it out to the whole group so everybody can take a look at it. And if anybody else finds anything, I mean, we can share it all so that we can be looking at this over the next couple of weeks.
Great.
Dave,
It's funny that the one closest to you, no one seems to know anything about, which sort of makes the point that it's, you know, you think of Greece, you think of suburb of Rochester, and you don't think of that picture there.
Dave,
Yeah.
this is Roger. So do any of these towns, and one of the features that we have, it seems to me, we're a Ramsar International recognized site for birding and migratory birds and all that stuff. And so we have in the winter, we have a bird count. We have a big bird fest, not a festival, but I'm trying to think of things that we have that are fairly unique. And that's one, we're a major birding site. And a lot of people do come here for that. And I don't know if any of these other towns have that particular feature.
I don't know. That's a great question. And maybe something we look into. I know there's a community I worked with many years ago in Minnesota that has the largest concentrations of bald eagles anywhere in the country, and that became their calling card.
Yeah, well, we have the bald eagles, and
Yep.
we have colonies of herons and egrets and so forth and so on. That at least one of our citizens here has developed a kayak tour to and around to the different islands and so forth. So I was just wondering if any of these sites are at all comparable to that, because that seems to be a big one attraction at least. And the whole paddles up thing, where we use the state park down there, the Beaver Island Park, is a good launch site, but it's one of the few really waterfront areas that we have, other than our marinas, which don't really present much in the terms of beaches or that kind of stuff. We don't have much of that here.
Right. I believe Braddock Bay is, a hot spot for birding, but you might want to look into that, or I can look into it.
Yeah. And I'm from Michigan. I'm a little familiar with St. Clair.
Okay, great. All right. So we'll still have to think about that. So the next thing, that the more immediate concern, as Dave mentioned at the top, is, as part of my research, is I'm planning a visit to Grand Island to tour sites, meet people, and get a lay of the land. I'm planning on being there the week of November 8th to the 12th. Not the entire week, most likely, probably about 2 to 3 days. I would say more likely the early part of the week. I don't know if November 8th is a holiday. That week is Veterans Day. I don't know if the town offices are closed that Monday or not.
They will be. They will be.
Intent for meeting the things, but the business, I would imagine most of the businesses will be open on the 8th. Maybe not, I don't know. Okay. Anyhow, so the point of it would be more to tour around and not to have too many in-person interviews with people other than those who are operators of visitor activities. We had mentioned, you mentioned kayakers, if they're outfitters, for example, I could just talk to them while I'm visiting their places of business, that sort of thing. I do think, on that list of interviewees, and I don't know if you want to bring that up on the screen or not, or if you all got it by email, you can just look at it. A lot of them group into, different like-minded categories. The first one being outdoor recreation, tourist attractions, second being local retailers, third being hotel and hospitality operators. Rather than trying to conduct individual interviews with all of those folks because you're sort of treading on the same turf, it might be better to try to put together kind of a focus group discussion for each of those three categories. And if there are any other categories, maybe do that as well. Excuse me. I think that might help us talk to more people. I have a limited amount of ability and time to talk to everybody. And instead of just picking, one outdoor recreation business and saying this person represents the whole industry, I think it would be better to put together a group of them and have them all talk at once. If there's an opportunity to plan that as an in-person discussion while I'm there, that would be great. But I know people are busy and it's hard to coordinate stuff like that. And so a Zoom discussion at another time is probably better. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Okay. Great. So just sort of a idea of what we're looking at in terms of schedule. So we're now right in the middle of October. I'm looking at visiting there in about 3 weeks. Over the next, 2-3 weeks before I go, I'm planning on doing the deep dive into the data and really getting to understand things from the numbers. And then I'll, do the reconnaissance and the interviews. And my hope is to get that data overview report that sums all of that up done around Thanksgiving and get it presented to you at your December meeting. So about 2 months from now. And then over the next month after that to, to do the best practices research, add it to that, and then kind of put together the final report and have that ready for you right after New Year's, and then present it at your January meeting 3 months out from now. And I don't know if you want there to be more public presentation to the town board or in some other public setting, but certainly after that would be appropriate as well. Okay, so I will stop sharing and certainly happy to get your thoughts and questions about what I'm doing and when things are going to happen.
Dave, one of the things I'm interested in is how, so you've identified some ecotourism opportunities.
Mhm.
I've seen my hometown up in northern Michigan is able to put on a brown trout festival for a whole week, and it generates a lot of income for the town. And I'm just, are you going to kind of look at perhaps the towns you're comparing us to opportunities that we might have for that kind of thing? How could we turn the Paddles Up event, which is usually a one-day event, into a whole week of activities, for example? Or how could we have, perhaps biking is a big thing here on Grand Island.
Mhm.
And if we're successful, you'll be able to bike all the way around the island, which is about 26 miles, which also lends itself to marathons,
Yep.
to Ironman stuff. We've got
I was
all,
just going to say Ironman. It seems like
all
an
the stuff
ideal
for
spot
Ironman
for an
here.
Ironman event.
So I think that maybe the task is to figure out how we draw people here, then keep them here around big events. And I have to say, there are people here on this committee, particularly Jen Pusatier, who's really helps plan events. And I think that's just one opportunity. I don't know what town you might compare us to that really puts on these kinds of festivals.
Yeah, I
I've
mean,
got-
I would caution too much on the town trying to say we want this festival, because these things typically are more organic. What I would say though is what's missing is the tourism infrastructure needed to support something like that. You have a couple of older hotels and a lot of smaller inns and B&Bs and things like that, but you just don't have the infrastructure to support 25,000 people descending on you all at once. You certainly don't have, the dining and entertainment options necessary to support that either. So I think that goes hand in hand with not just the town center development, but some of the waterfront development, the two waterfront towns that you have on the island, and opportunities for revitalization in those areas and additional business activity. So, those are all things that are part of the same puzzle.
Well, I've talked to, for example, the person that puts on the birding event here. It's like a weekend event, kind of
Mhm.
shared between Niagara Falls and Grand Island. And I said, would you want to turn this into a week-long event? And he said they would love to turn it into
Yeah.
a week-long event. So you got people interested in doing this stuff. But like you said, we got to figure out how to develop the infrastructure to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have the unique asset that, you're smack between places that have an immense amount of visitor infrastructure. But, the question is, do they want to play nice with you? I'm not sure what your community's relationship is with the city of Niagara Falls in particular. But I'm sure, they, on the one hand, they don't want anyone leaving Niagara Falls once they're there. On the other hand, you have one visitor promotion organization or tourism development organization serving the whole region, Visit Buffalo Niagara, and they're a regional organization, and they just want to see hotel rooms filled up anywhere in the region. So, they're definitely on my list of groups to talk to and to take their temperature on it.
Thank you.
Yep. You're muted, Dave, if you're trying to talk.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You got Visit Buffalo Niagara, but I mean, they're primarily Erie County, and then you've got the Destination Niagara folks, which are the Niagara County folks. So,
Right.
Visit Buffalo Niagara, the Erie County. I mean, obviously they're doing some marketing and want to leverage Niagara Falls. But you do have two distinct groups that I think they collaborate, but they also compete on some level. So we'll have to decide if you want to talk to each of them individually.
I think I should talk to them separately. Yeah. Okay.
You also mentioned earlier after the January presentation to us, the possibility of presenting in some other public way. I really do like the idea of the board in particular having an unfiltered presentation so that they don't feel it's like us telling them what you said. And so I think that would really be helpful for them.
Okay.
Since they were in part, help responsible for us being able to do this with you.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that exactly what Martha's saying is the whole unfiltered aspect here, right? I mean, the idea and the object of having you as an expert, that has done a lot of work in the area, but you're not from the area, come in and kind of keep it real in a sense that, here's really what the facts are, no matter what your perception is or what you might think. Here's the economic reality, and here's the initial steps you should be taking in order to improve your, the well-being of the town in these specific areas. So,
yep. Okay. Great. Any other thoughts or questions for me at this point?
No, we kind of charged the group here. We've got to come up, and we've got a short period of time to figure out, who those key people are we want Dave to meet while he's here or do Zoom, as well as, making sure that he views the places we want him to in those couple days that he's here as well.
Right. Yeah, and if you can, just sort of internally work on that itinerary for me of, places I must see and get me the contact information for those places, I'll set things up with them. But, those 2 days, Tuesday the 9th, Wednesday the 10th are the 2 days that are going to be at the heart of what I'll do.
I just want to ask a quick question about the interviews. If you might just speak a little more about how they typically go. I'm wondering, is there anything in advance of those meetings? Do we ask the participants to answer a few questions, or how do we sort of preface this with them? And then how typically do you run these types of meetings?
Sure. Interviews is probably a little too strong of a word. It's more of a fact-finding discussion. I sort of see myself as kind of like a reporter coming into the community. So I'm not, grilling people and demanding all the answers, but kind of writing a profile of the community and trying to get at many different aspects of it. I typically like to, have sort of a boilerplate thing that I send. And actually, I think I can write that up about what is this study? What is the purpose of this? Usually I'll ask people for 20 to 30 minutes of their time if it's a phone call, or 30 to 45 minutes if it's an in-person meeting, and kind of tell them, here's what the purpose of this is, because we're talking to a diverse set of people. Some people are business owners, some are more public sector, economic development or tourism folks. I'll be talking to contractors, developers, realtors. It'll be a different conversation with each of those folks, because I'm kind of after a different perspective from each of them. But sort of generally speaking, it's about, tell me what Grand Island is to you. Tell me what the priorities are of the community for this effort. And, give me sort of, you mentioned that unfiltered answer. I always tell people at the outset that I'm not going to share anything you say with me with anyone else. So if, Mr. Smith talks to me and tells me something controversial, I'm the only person who will ever hear that. I'll have a list of here's everyone I talked to, and then here's sort of a distillation of everything I was told. But I'm not going to say this person told me this thing, because that gets people in trouble. And to Dave's point, I've often found, coming into a community as an outside consultant, people will tell me things that they would never say to anyone else in the community. But I also, as a reporter, would protect my sources and sort of hold that in confidence, and, say, I'm glad you put your trust in me. I will pay that trust back by not putting you in a bad position. Okay. Well, I'm, as I said, going to be diving into the data over the next few weeks as I get ready for my visit. And I guess I should stay in touch with you, Dave, about the logistics of the visit and, who I'll need to see and where I'll need to go.
Yeah.
Okay. And I will send you kind of a blurb for people, as I mentioned, for those that we want to interview.
Okay. Yeah, I think that'll be helpful.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of, there's a lot of relationships that members of this committee have with people that you're going to want to talk to, and for them to be able to speak specifically off of that blurb sheet or share it.
Well, and it's a small
cue
town,
everything up.
and you all, I imagine you all know each other's business to a degree. Yes. Your smiles say it all. Great. Well, this has been great. I'm really looking forward to diving into this, and hopefully to meeting some of you in real life and not just in little boxes on a screen.
Right.
Some of us look better in the little boxes.
I know my
Fair
picture
enough.
looks a lot better than I do in real life right now.
I look taller.
Yeah, definitely.
All I care about.
And Martha doesn't have that angelic
Oh, not by far.
ray coming out of her head.
Great.
Well, it's
All
great
right,
to
great.
have
Well,
you on board.
I'll be seeing you all
Yes.
pretty soon.
Thank you,
you.
David.
Thank
We're,
you.
Thanks.
we're excited to get this going. This is something we've been wanting to get off the ground for a long time. So it's exciting that it's finally happening.
Great. Glad to hear it.
Thanks, David.
All right. See you soon. Bye.
Thanks, Dave.
Bye.
Okay. Kristen had put together that kind of master list, and I think it had 30 plus entities on it. I think we should have a more focused idea on maybe what Dave's looking for. Roger, I'm hopeful you can help us out with the eco guys he should be talking to locally. Mary, maybe you have some ideas on the development, both on the residential and the commercial side, even though I know there's a lot of folks that do both. Maybe that would be the easy way to do it.
Yep, yes, there is. Hopefully they are willing to,
Yeah.
you know, so.
And if
that-
they have to be individual conversations, just so we can aggregate it, because I know sometimes certain business owners and real estate folks don't like to talk
In front of their
in
competition.
front of their peers about
Right.
some
Oh,
stuff, you know, we can do that as well. So,
Well, some of those guys too are not gonna be, you know, they could be a phone visit
yeah.
as well,
Yeah.
okay? They just have to have a heads up as to why we're doing this.
Yeah.
And have a good understanding of what we're trying to do here, and then we can get some honest answers.
Okay. I think that works. So if I guess the way I want to do this is, you know, to hear from each of you, you know, start thinking about who, but then finalize it once Dave sends us that blurb. I imagine I'll get that blurb from him tomorrow over the weekend to send out to everybody, so we can get on that. And then if we can set up actual interviews, I imagine he'll want to talk to probably a couple people at town hall while he's here. You know, a couple business owners. I mean, I can call Eric over at the chamber and kind of get an idea from him. Obviously Jen might want to be part of that as well. Bob, I don't know about the sailing outfits, and you know, I don't know how we want to do that, maybe with some of the private clubs on the island. I don't know if that's something, I'll have to ask him if that's something he really wants to delve into.
I don't know that you need that.
Yeah.
It's a tough one. I mean, there really isn't access to boating on the island unless you're spending money for it.
Right.
And you know, the launch club gets some visitors. The one event that the launch club does do is that wooden boat.
The antique boat and car show. That was very well attended.
Yeah, Sandy Beach runs a regatta, but we get 30 people, you know, that's no big deal. But maybe we could find somebody from the launch club. I'll look and see who I can find from the launch club that might want to talk about about that. But that's the only public thing that they do.
Yeah. Okay.
Might want to,
Do we wind
Just,
up putting together?
sorry, go ahead.
Go
Mary,
ahead.
Yes.
then we'll go to Kristen.
Okay, I just thought maybe we should check with Jim Sharp. There's some contacts and some phone numbers that he may have, for example, the Holiday Inn Express developer, you know, and a few others that we might just want to touch base with him so that we have contact with some of those people. That's all. So we might want to ask him. And of course, the supervisor to just see, you know, what contacts he has that he would like us to interview as far as developers go. I mean, are we going to just do developers that are have already built, or are we going to, you know, maybe dip our toe in for people who are developing too, or no?
What's your distinction there?
In other words, somebody that's already built and developed, or somebody that's planning on developing or is continuing to develop.
Yeah.
You know?
I actually think your latter is more relevant because they're the ones that are going through the process right now.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the lodging, definitely makes sense. The new owner of what's Fantasy Island called now? I'm gonna call it Fantasy Island forever.
Niagara Adventures,
Yeah.
something like that.
Probably a conversation with them. I would have said branches, but they've sold. I think that's owned by. It might be one of those real estate investment trusts on it now. We'll figure out exactly how he wants to attack that. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, definitely get. We're at crunch time here to try and figure this out. As well as an idea on what kind of venues and tour and what he should look at while he's here those 2 days, spend some time at.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask about, is sort of like how we are as a group going to facilitate the various things, the tour and the interviews. Just wondering, like, how involved do we get? Do we want to have a couple people from our board like tour him around, like go with him and introduce him around to places?
He's probably, Kristen, my guess is he's probably going to want a general tour of the island and that can be Dave or me or Roger. And then he's going to want a list of people to go and talk to on his own. He's not going to want any of us sitting with him while he's talking to the guy from the Holiday Inn or the guy from the Radisson. So my guess is we probably got a half a day to spend with him, and then
Yeah, I think you're dead on. It's his individual interviews. I mean, we shouldn't be driving him there or taking him in anywhere because I think it taints that aspect of his work. I think the tours, there's probably a couple different elements. Like I have probably no idea half the places Roger's trounced around on the island, as an example. So, so that might be something where a couple of us can. Bye, Martha. Thank you for everything.
Bye.
See you,
that might be something that a couple of us might want to divvy up. And then maybe we have whichever those 2 nights are, maybe that Tuesday night, we schedule a dinner with them, and as many of us that could show up from the committee to have dinner with them. We do that and just kind of have some frank conversations, what he's seen, what he's experiencing, and get some feedback and that kind of stuff while he's here.
So
Dave, let me ask something. Could we go into executive session and turn off the recording? And because talking about some of the specific people we want him to talk to when this is going to be posted is probably not such a great idea.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have a specific list right now. I think we're just throwing some stuff around there. But I agree. I don't think that's necessarily a public list.
What I'm saying is maybe we can, if we stop the recording.
Well, do we need to do that, or should we just deal with that on email? And everybody's got a charge of coming up with specific people right now. I mean, I think that's it.
well, this is just so that I know how this is going to happen. Okay. Once we do come up with the people, we gather phone numbers. Do we call, some of those people on there and just say, this is what we're doing. Are you interested? If they are, then go ahead and tell them, well, look, you're going to get a call from Dave. He's going to be in town X day. And he's going to set up a time to come and visit you, right? Is that how it's going to happen?
That would be the best way to do it. If we knew there was actually somebody that would take his phone call. There might be instances where we say, look, this is the person you need to talk to. I haven't been able to connect with him. You try and do it. Maybe he connects with him while he's here. And maybe he connects with them after he's home and he does something via Zoom or via a phone call. So,
Well, I
Yeah.
just think preemptive phone calls saying this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Are you, you're going to be getting a phone call in the next few days from this gentleman if you're interested, and
Well,
he's
that-
going to be in town X day. He's going to probably want to come and see you. Can you make an appointment with him?
right.
If
And I
I
think
could-
that's what that blurb's going to be for. He's going to send us, so we have something to
Right.
speak off of. Yep.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
Hey, Jen,
Yeah, if I could just jump in and say, I'm with Bob. I wouldn't mind going into executive session for a few minutes just to, bounce a few names off you guys. I think we could cover a lot of ground in a few minutes of just chatting about it, versus emails, which a lot of time can go by between questions and answers and all that.
All right. Somebody make a motion to go in executive session. I don't see why we can't do it.
I'll make the motion.
Well,
I'll
should
second.
we finish the rest of the agenda and then do that, or are we good with, what do you guys want to do?
Well, we've
Let's
lost
stay on.
Martha now, so let's finish do you mind coming back, Jen?
Absolutely.
Okay,
That's fine.
all right. All right, so we didn't get the September minutes yet, did we? Or
I sent them out, but I think you got them at about 6:58 or
yeah, I
6.
thought I saw it come.
Well, I couldn't find the damn video, and then I went to Rhonda, and then I find it, and you sent it too, but I can never find the damn thing online. I don't know where it is, but I should be more proactive. I've just been so damn busy, I can't tell you, but nonetheless, you got them in. Take a look at them.
It would be easier if you did this at least a day ahead.
I know.
Do we want to try to dig them out of our email now or just wait and let's wait and
Just
do
wait
it.
till next month.
Yeah, we can wait.
I'm less concerned about minutes that since we're getting recorded all the time. I mean, there's a record of our meeting out there. If anybody really had an issue with anything, they could just watch it.
Right. Yeah,
So,
And
I
can
mean,
find it.
exactly.
Take a look at my minutes, so they're damn good.
We
Yeah,
don't
they
have
are.
All right, we don't have a town board report because we don't have anybody from the town board. The only other thing on the list was the referral letter that Martha put together after Jen drafted hers. Jen Pusatier drafted hers. Dave, you wanted to bring up something about the reason for the letter.
Yeah, well, yeah, we were talking about cannabis, we were talking about this, and we didn't really discuss, I think this one in particular. When I read the letter, I started to just even ask myself some questions like, what prompted this, right? I mean, what prompted us to want to put a letter like this together? And then as I read it, I'm starting to look at it and say, I'm not sure what prompted this for this particular tone. It almost sounds like the town board has done some kind of, they haven't lived up to some end of the arrangement, or there's something that we've been tasked with that they're not accommodating us on. And I'm not sure what that particularly is. And the other thing I want to make sure is that we're not starting to kind of mission creep on other boards, right? We're not the planning board. We're not the conservation board. We're not the traffic safety board. And I guess a fourth thing, as I look at my notes here, is what do we consider an economic development project, right? Is it every project that comes before the town, and what is our particular role? Because I don't think we've ever had a defined relationship with the town board on what we're specifically supposed to do. And I think that's come and been defined a little bit by the comprehensive plan and some of the long range planning, because there's bullets now, right? There's the matrix, right? There's certain things that we're tasked with doing, one of which is this market study. But I'm not sure inherent in that matrix is us reviewing and opining on all economic development activities in the town. And the town board hasn't asked us to do that. And if we're going to ask to be more involved with those things, I think we need to put some parameters on that, and we have to request that of the board versus, hey, there's all kinds of stuff going on. You're not telling us about it. We're not real happy about that. We want you to start telling us about things so we can provide our input and opinion on it. So I was having some struggles with it. You know, I was kind of going back and forth with Bob because Bob wanted to send a letter out, and I said, listen, let's put it back on the agenda, because I'm not comfortable with the length or what the arrangement or the relationship is between what we're supposed to be focusing on as an advisory board and what may be within the context of that letter. So I guess I had a lot of questions on there. Like, I'm trying to recall what prompted it. I'm asking what we consider economic development projects, and then what has ever been an expectation or a request by the town board for us to do stuff. I mean, so I guess there's 3 or 4 different things in there.
Well, there's 2 ways to approach what we do. One is to sit back and answer any questions that the town board has. The other is to be proactive on looking for opportunities for the town. Now, we've done both of those. I think what brought this up, and I'm talking for Jen, and I don't know her thoughts. My guess is that, and it's happened to me, is that people say, oh, you're on the Economic Development Board, so what's happening?
Right.
Well, I don't know. You know, I mean, other than going and looking at what's been posted on the town website, I don't have any more idea about what's happening in this town than some of the people that are asking me the question. And I think that my guess is that that's what's prompted Jen's writing the letter. And if you recall, the way this started was Jen was going to send the letter herself, or we as a board could send it. So that's where I think it's coming from. And we as a board kind of need to decide if what we're going to do, and I don't say all we're going to do, I don't mean it that way. If what we're going to do is be the group that will answer questions and provide opinions to the town board, and also look for some side economic projects, then we shouldn't be sending the letter. I mean, we should be requesting that that our liaison tries to keep us as informed as possible. But on some of these issues, you know, there are public meetings going on. I mean, something pops up in the dispatch or on Facebook, and it's like we have no clue about it. So I'm just putting forward what I think Jen's ideas were. Anybody else?
I mean, I always just go back to the mission statement within the master plan. I mean, if you read it, I'm not going to read it, but it's on page 37. I have it in front of me. There's gray area with certain things because it falls within what our mission statement is, and those things we should probably weigh in on. You know, nobody's trying to zone in on something that's really not in our lane. Boards need to stay in their lane, okay? And we're an advisory board. That's all we are, you know. The town has to ask us if they want us to weigh in on it. I would think that with the talent that we have on this board, they would want, you know, some of those opinions, you know. Sometimes they don't need it, sometimes they do. But you got to read the mission statement and you got to think, okay, does the issue, whatever it is, fall within those parameters? That's all.
Jen, Roger, Kristen, you know, I don't know how you feel on this. The way Bob described it, I thought you did it quite succinctly. I think that's what we are, is we are advisory, and we have a set thing we're supposed to be working on. And I think the main task right now is this market analysis, and then we'll see what comes out of that. I don't think, and you know, I don't know what the right mechanism is, but it's difficult for us to kind of know what's going on with everything, because one, it's not our role. Stuff doesn't come to us. And until you know, we would meet once a month, and then our liaison kind of gives us an update on kind of what's going on, or we could ask questions about particular projects. And that's, I mean, that's just the reality of it. You know, we're not the economic development board or the economic development agency for the town. And I don't want, and I know that might be frustrating. I think it's sometimes if somebody asks a question and, well, how come you guys don't know about this? Well, it's not, in my opinion, and this is just me individually, I'm not sure we have the capacity to operate like that right now. I think it's, you know, and I'll look at it from one specific point. I mean, we've been focused on this, and we've had kind of a list of, well, who should the consultant meet with? And it's been a couple months, and we haven't really progressed it. And now we're at a point where we have to. I just think there's a certain level of time and energy that all of us have to bring to this particular thing with everything else everything's working on. Some of you are working on 2 or 3 different things for the town, and as a resident, you know, I truly appreciate that. Like I said, I'm just not comfortable with the kind of the scope and the direction. I'm not sure we, you know, that's our role. And if that's what we want our role to be, I think a conversation has to be made with the town board then, versus kind of a letter saying you're not doing your job. I think it reflects poorly on the board for something that they're not really guilty of per se.
Let's do this. We've got a pretty small group this month. We're missing a few people. Let's table this and talk about it next month, if we get enough extra people.
Yeah, I'd like Jen here. I'd like her perspective on it. And you know, ultimately, maybe she said maybe she's the one who wants to be more involved or aware of it, or from a citizen standpoint, the town needs to do a better job of posting materials and being transparent to the public. And maybe that's really where this ends up.
All right, let's
I'll
move.
scan over the economic development section in the master plan for everybody to read.
All right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it next month. Let's see if we have any objection, but what I'd like to do is call close the meeting, and we'll stay on board for a little bit for an executive session for discussing the specifics of the people we're going to interview and anything else that pops up. Any objection?
No, motion to adjourn.
Yep.
Second.
Okay. All right, stop the recording.
Bob, I'll be right back. I get my power cord.